Greetings, members of the Board of Education and the Sun Prairie Area School District community. I am Dr. Sarah Chaya Clarity here with my colleague Deb Larson, who is our literacy coordinator, and we are here to present to you our 6th through 12th grade English Language Arts instructional materials adoption recommendation. To begin with, it is important that we ground all of our decision making in the vision, mission, of our district, as well as our entire strategic framework. And curriculum renewal and design certainly lives in every area of this strategic framework, but particularly today we'll be speaking about our commitment to equity and excellence through continuous improvement and through our culture of educational excellence and advancing outcomes for students, particularly in the area of the student experiences goal. To begin with, we'd like to outline what is changing with our current ELA materials. So currently in place, we have the units of study, which are the Lucy Calkins curriculum at our grades 6, 7, and 8. And we have our high school handwritten curriculum, which when we speak of curriculum, we are thinking about standards, instructional materials, the instructional practices, as well as the assessments that go into a curricular material set. And today we're specifically speaking about the materials component, and so the resources that we're using to teach that curriculum. Why are we changing? Well, we have updated our student results policies, and our student results policies continue to call us to make sure we're advancing educational outcomes for students. In addition to that, we have a renewed curriculum renewal and design plan. In that plan, we follow a 6-year cycle. And throughout that 6-year cycle, as we'll be hearing about in a little bit, there is a space for materials adoption. We also have some updated Wisconsin English Language Arts standards that have been adopted by our steering committee. And in those standards, there are 5 key shifts, as they're called, in English language arts that compel us to examine instructional materials and resources differently than in the past. Finally, we also have a newly created Sun Prairie Area School District literacy vision statement that our ELA steering committee created in 2022. Deb?
Hello, everyone. So as Sarah mentioned, our curriculum renewal and design cycle consists of 6 years. We are finishing up phase 2 of that curriculum renewal and design cycle, which includes implementation and instructional materials selection. So the work of year 2 included identifying reportable, essential, and supporting standards. And then this year we worked to unpack those identified standards and also do vertical alignment of proficiency. And then finally, part of the work that we did was to analyze resources, and we did a selection of resources, and we will continue by developing our professional development plan in order to support our educators in implementing this new curricular resource. So educator involvement is at the heart of curriculum renewal and design. We put out a call to all interested staff and did intentional outreach to expand the diversity of our group to include a variety of roles, demographics, and course sections that are taught by individuals. So you can see by this slide the variety of staff members and the amount of hours that were invested in the selection of this curricular resource, which we are here to talk more about today. So in 2022, the English Language Arts Steering Committee reviewed a variety of standard sets, and we came to consensus that we were going to adopt the 2020 Wisconsin ELA standards. And so we are aligning our curriculum, which is standards, materials, assessments, and our instructional approach with the latest Wisconsin standards for English language arts that were released in 2020. Sarah?
Thanks, Deb. So there are 5 important shifts that are coming from the previous standards to these 2020 Wisconsin standards for English language arts. Identifying the key shifts builds understanding of how these standards differ from previous standards. The shifts also serve as a tool that educators could use to identify what's necessary in standards aligned instruction and assessment at a high level. 3 of the 5 shifts which have the yellowish box around them, shifts 3, 4, and 5, relate to concepts that were previously called for in the Common Core state standards. So those standards are tied to equity in service of advancing academic outcomes by having regular practice with complex texts, building academic vocabulary, engaging in literacy practices that are grounded in textual evidence, and building knowledge through texts. So those 3 shifts are stated as shifts, and as I said, they are more aligned to the Common Core. The other 2 shifts, shifts 1 and 2, that have the red box around them, are new and unique to Wisconsin. These 2 shifts also advance educational equity, but the educational equity here is more tied to identity. So in these shifts, we're thinking about how are our instructional practices and materials in the areas of reading, writing, speaking, listening, and language, focusing on recognizing, valuing, and sustaining students' identities, as well as understanding and deepening understandings of the identities of others, as well as understanding how students are flexible users of language, and that moving away from this former practice that there's a standard way that English should be spoken or read or communicated. And so again, these are 5 key shifts that all align to equity. We're looking at equity in 2 different ways: academic access and identity. This slide outlines that a little more clearly. You can see that in grades 6 through 8, we used a tool called the Literacy Curriculum Evaluation Tool to outline shifts 3, 4, and 5, which is equity as academic access and opportunity. Those 3 shifts that were aligned to the Common Core. At 9 through 11, we use the Instructional Materials Evaluation Tool. Reason being, the middle school team aligned with an evaluation tool that had been used at CESA 6, so aligned with some of the work that we had been doing at kindergarten through 5th grade. At high school, we used a different evaluation tool. We were rating a published curriculum, and as you'll see, we were rating our own curriculum. And so we used this instructional materials evaluation tool in partnership with a consultant from CESA 2. So working with a couple of different CESAs here in the state. On day 2 of our steering committee's review at both middle school and at high school, we evaluated that equity for recognition, representation, and honoring all facets of students' identities, those shifts 1 and 2 shared on the previous slide, with the Great Lakes Equity Tool. So that was a common tool that we used on separate days with those teams of educators. The 5th point I mentioned is that our steering committee adopted the what's really called for in the Wisconsin standards, a vision statement. So part of curriculum renewal and design is for every content area to have a vision statement so that it's clear to everyone what the vision is for that content area of instruction. And so this vision statement reads, "We believe literacy to be a basic human right through which every student can realize their full potential." Deb?
Thank you, Sarah. Now we'd like to share more details about our instructional review process. Our evaluation process followed a gated process approach. Ed Reports was the first gate. The focus of Ed Reports is to ensure that instructional materials are rigorous and standards aligned. Additional considerations are the criterion in the remaining shaded cells that you see there. We wanted to know if the resource was research-based, had built-in supports for differentiation, was knowledge-based, and if it was published from 2018 to present. These criterion helped us think about what is included in a quality curriculum. Based upon this process, we selected the publishers we wanted to learn from and do our own research. We had learned some things about these resources, but we wanted to do a more in-depth study. As stated in the previous slide, Ed Reports, which evaluates for college and career standards and usability, was our first gate. Those resources listed on this slide were double green for meeting the expectations within Ed Reports. Those with the yellow arrow are the ones the steering committee lifted up as ones we wanted to hear from the publisher representative and do an in-depth study as a steering committee team. For 6th through 8th grade, you will see that those included My Perspectives, EL Education, which has 2 publishers, both Imagine Learning and Open Up Resources, hence the 2 arrows, and StudySync. For 9-12, the team did an in-depth analysis of their current English 9, 10, and 11 courses, as well as the published Our Odell resource, which is also from Open Up Resources. Now we will share more details regarding the review process at each grade level. The Literacy Curriculum Evaluation Tool was used to evaluate for equity as academic access and opportunity, which are key shifts 3, 4, and 5 that Sarah noted previously. So as you can see in the bar graph here, using the Literacy Curriculum Evaluation Tool, My Perspectives had the highest average of all 4 of the resources using those 6 criterion listed on the left-hand side.
So then on day 2 with middle school, we looked at equity for recognition, representation, and honoring all facets of students' identities, key shifts 1 and 2, by using the Great Lakes Equity Tool. And the Great Lakes Equity Tool evaluates for these 7 criterion of invisibility, stereotyping, imbalance and selectivity, fragmentation and isolation, cosmetic bias, whitewashing, and linguistic bias. So each of those are a section of what was evaluated for each curricular resource. Evaluators noted the numbers of instances where the criterion were present. So they were able to rate strongly disagree, disagree, agree, strongly agree, or no evidence. The reason being, we felt strongly in using this tool that a numeric scale and counting up numerically and finding the mean didn't truly represent the number of indicators that are in each of these categorical areas. Rather, we were looking for, within the category of invisibility, again, there were multiple indicators, how many instances were we seeing specific examples of that criteria showing up. And so we found the mode, the number of instances concentrated across the 4 different areas, across the 4 different curricular resources, excuse me. So here you can see StudySync, My Perspectives, EL Education, and Imagine Learning. And again, going back to the previous slide, My Perspectives had the most favorable results when we examined for equity as recognition, representation, and honoring all facets of students' identities. So then at high school, we examined courses English 9, English 10, and English 11. In our school system, students are required to take 4 years of English. English 9, English 10, and English 11 are the most common courses we take. We do not have an English 12. Students typically would either take one of these core courses or they would take an advanced placement or AP course instead of one of these courses. The AP course materials are not open to modification. It's a standard curriculum set forward by the College Board. So we knew we wouldn't be changing anything there. And then we have our English electives, in which students take English electives and or those AP classes to round out their 4 credits. So just wanted to give some background on why we examined English 9, English 10, and English 11. So as I mentioned earlier, we did an instructional materials analysis looking at shifts 3, 4, and 5 around academic access and opportunity, rating for things like claim evidence reasoning, complex text, knowledge building, flexible language, and instructional supports, what's called for in those three shifts, 3, 4, and 5. And here you can see we looked at affordances and drawbacks, which was a way for us to qualitatively review the resources, again, as opposed to doing a numeric quantitative measure of check boxes, whether we did or didn't see something. So here you can see captured both the affordances as well as the drawbacks of each of the resources reviewed. On day 2 then, for high school, we used the same Great Lakes Equity Tool process that was used for middle school, and evaluators noted the number of instances where those criterion were present again. with the highest mode of responses being captured on this chart. You can see here our teacher-created materials were most favorably reviewed by each grade level independently, and showed that there seemed to be more of a concentration of agreement, of presence of equity as identity. So then we are now moving to advance recommendations and a request for purchase. Our recommendations for resources to use to teach our curriculum are Savas Learning Company's My Perspectives at the middle school grades and Sun Prairie Area School District Educated Created Materials at the high school. However, we would not continue to use the high school curricular materials and curriculum that we have. We would be rewriting the curriculum at high school. So what to know moving forward? On behalf of the superintendent, myself, the Director of Secondary Teaching, Learning, and Equity, recommends the approval of an expenditure not to exceed $470,000 for the purchase of Savas My Perspectives Universal Literacy Materials, which includes a Success Maker supplemental digital platform and professional learning for grades 6 through 8 to span the 2024 through 2030 school years. With the support of a consultant from CESA 2, we are going to rewrite our high school curricular materials across the 24-25 school year to implement in 25 through 31. The cost to acquire and implement Savas and rewrite the high school materials and purchase the resources to accompany that are budgeted within the 24-25 Teaching, Learning, and Equity Instructional Materials budget. So provide a little bit more of an in-depth overview of My Perspectives, English Language Arts. You can see this comes from right within the resource here. It is a student-centered design. So every unit has an intriguing theme. There are 5 units in grade level, and those units have that theme that's aligned to an essential question, which also aligns with our AVID practices that we have in place in our district. Relevant and diverse texts allow students to see themselves reflected in the stories and bring their lived experiences to the classroom. This is very much centered on student voice and student engagement. And the idea behind My Perspectives is that around that theme, there are multiple texts that shape a story from different perspectives of the authors of those texts. So we are working on reading and writing, and know that reading and writing are reciprocal, and students develop reading and writing skills and then transfer those skills back and forth to one another. And it also includes speaking and listening as well as grammar. And so there's a quote here from My Perspective author that says, with today's rapidly changing classrooms, digital technologies, and workplace literacy demands, we need a new way of teaching English that taps into students' cultural and linguistic assets, that engages them as meaningful participants in classrooms, that develops their identities as powerful academic readers and writers, and that exposes them to diverse literature and nonfiction texts. So that's that equity as identity piece coming through. So to share sort of the unit overview, again, you can see here the 5 units laid out at 6th grade. These units are theme-based units. They're not necessarily aligned to science or social studies themes like the elementary curricular is that we just adopted. They're general themes that again come with an essential question. So in 6th grade, the theme is growing up. Then the next one is Natural Allies, Living with Technology, Imagined World, and Extraordinary People. So we know that today's students are really good at swiping for information. They can access a plethora of content at their fingertips. They read, view, text, post, like, and dislike, and have more choices and more opportunities to share their voice. My Perspectives brings literature to life with carefully selected, high-quality, diverse texts and media that allow students to see themselves and feel a part of the conversation. So using things such as poetry, graphic novels, short stories, speeches, film clips, scientific articles, a variety of different texts. My Perspectives immerses students in a variety of classic and contemporary literature texts that asks students to wrestle with important questions, push their thinking, and build content knowledge across content areas so that they're prepared to be skilled readers and effective communicators in today's world. So you can see the themes here from 7th grade. I invite you to pause the video if you want to look a little bit more closely at those topics and themes. And then again, here are the 5 units and the themes for 8th grade. The way that a unit is laid out, you can see here, for example, this is 6th grade unit 1, so the very first unit students will use when they walk into middle school. It lays out reading, writing, speaking, and listening, as well as having a grammar component to it. There is whole group, peer group, and independent learning that's happening across this unit. You can see the varying genres that are lifted up here, coming from memoirs, poetry, oral storytelling, realistic short stories, personal essays, personal narratives, all combined in this one unit. So grade level text at 6th grade, the 925 to 1070 is a Lexile number. So typical Lexile for a 6th grader who is proficient in 6th grade is 925 to 1070. You can see the Lexiles listed here. Now I would say they're approximating that band, and that's reasonable given this is the very first unit of 6th grade, right? So most of them being within the 800 to 1,000 range here. There's a variety of text elements that are featured in terms of first-person point of view, central idea and theme, vocabulary, plot conflict resolution, right? So lots of different text elements. There is authentic literature here, like books that you could go to the bookstore and purchase, written by diverse authors. And then the pacing guide is laid out. So the pacing here, these are meant to be about 50-minute lessons. We have 87 minutes in our English language arts block. And so it is going to also allow for us to do supplemental instruction and some other areas that we might be able to amplify would be through things like book clubs or novel studies. So the curriculum comes with these novel options. There are units that are aligned to specific texts. Again, these are authentic literature texts. There are digital novels, and there are print novels that we're able to select. And so you can see that each unit then within a grade level has specific texts that are recommended to fit that theme. Success Maker is the digital platform that provides supplementary instruction. So it begins with an age-appropriate animation or video lesson. That's an explicit instruction, then moves into guided practice, where students are working with the text digitally, and then there is some independent skill review. And this is really meant to be adaptive. So this component really does adjust to meet each student where they're at, and then provides the instant instructional insights and gives teachers some targeted supports that they could also be doing in alignment with this and some small group instruction. So this is supplemental to the core resource. I do want to come back really quickly and address this slide here. So we noted that in the disagree in the area of grade 7 and some no evidence in the area of grade 7, particularly in stereotyping and fragmentation and isolation. This comes from a unit 3, called Transformations. And in this unit, the whole class read is A Christmas Carol. And so you may be familiar with that story. It's a pretty classic text written by Charles Dickens, but the team that was evaluating it was really closely examining for equity as identity here and thinking about, does a story about Christmas really advance the ideas of equity in our school district? And so we will be looking at that unit more closely and thinking about that particular whole class read. Again, some options might be, here is the unit 3 supplementary novels that we could swap out instead of that whole class read. That would certainly be a place to do it. There are other additional supplemental texts that are listed within this unit as well. And so that's something that we will be taking a look at and making a decision about whether we will or will not include the Christmas Carol in unit 3, which we'll get to probably about beginning of second semester.
All right, I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to listen to this screencast. We look forward to speaking with you and answering any questions you may have at the school board meeting on June 10th. Thanks so much and have a great rest of your day.